Recovery Church. Thanks for being here. I got about a half hour or so to tell you 55 years of wild, strange trip it's been. And 33 of those years were hell-bent on destruction and disaster and addiction. And 22 years I was filled with sobriety and salvation and my Savior. So in AA, they say, you know, we share in a general way what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. Okay, so I'm going to kind of do that. I'm not real big on drunkalogs or drugalogs. If you're sitting in a place like this, listening to a moron like me, you all know how to partay. Okay? You don't need me to show off that I did it like this, I did it like that, I did it with a football bat. We all know how to get down, and we all know how to get dirty. And some of us have stayed that way for a long time, okay? And I was one of those people. I tell a little bit about my background, because my background, not to, you know, in case you misunderstand what I want to say, I'm not saying this to blame someone, or to name someone, or to claim someone. I'm just giving you an idea of what set my psyche into motion that kind of was like a curveball. Started off in what would seem by the outside world a pretty cool direction, but it ended up taking a wild hook and doing a whole lot of disaster. And so basically I was, as most of you know, I'm from Rhode Island. Go Pats. And I was born up in a small town up there called Smithfield. And I was born into a very, very let's just say dysfunctional family, to use a buzzword, a catchword that a lot of people are familiar with. I had a shameless, perfectionistic, rageaholic, abusive father, and a alcoholic, codependent, suicidal mother. And so the role as the first child, born into that meat grinder, I adopted the role, kind of unspoken, is that I had to make all things right. I had to fix this thing. This thing is all messed up because of me, so I got to do something to fix this. So my father would basically, the life I lived growing up, even through my teen years, until I got old enough to get out of high school and get into college, away from that nonsense, I basically heard that you're no good, you're going to be on Skid Row without a red cent, you're a product of a whore, the best part of you ran down my leg, and all sorts of other loving things that every child growing up should hear from his father. And I never had my father come to any of my sporting events. He never played any ball coach, did any of his father-son stuff. Shirley never told me or showed me that he loved me, and he just kept telling me I was no good, I was no good, my mother was no good. He used a lot of words that I can't use because this fool in the front is putting this stuff on tape, so I can't drop the bombs that I need to tell you what was going on. But if some of you came from that side of the neighborhood, you know what I'm kind of talking about. And basically the dynamic that I got going on inside of me was you're no good, you're no good, you're no good. And I kept responding, no, I am, no, I am. That's not true, that's a lie. But there was something going on I didn't understand. Although in my head I understood the concept that he was whacked, that he was, you know, whatever, a lot of words, you know, that type of thing. And that what he was saying wasn't true about my mother. I love my mother, you know, even though we had to go find her vodka and pour half of it down the water and water it down with water so she wouldn't drink too much to overdose. And we had to take her Valiums and switch them with pills that kind of looked like Valiums that weren't Valiums so she wouldn't actually commit suicide and all this other stuff. But still, there was this dynamic going on inside of me, in my head, I knew was wrong. But if you hear that day in and day out, you're no good. From this big to that big, no matter what you're saying to yourself in your head, your heart is reflecting that message that your father gave you. And so even though I thought I was this, and I was supposed to be that, and I was doing this, and I was blah, 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 deep inside I was never good enough. And so when I became old enough, somewhere in my teens, to not want to be part of that anymore, I did, you know, kind of divorce myself from that, and I resigned myself to the fact I was not going to have a father. So I made a conscious decision that I was going to have to be my own father. So my life became, I guess, both divided and duplicated in the same moment. And the real problem with that was, since I was going to be my own father, I only had one example to go by. So I thought my father was abusive. You should have seen how I took over and what I ended up doing to myself for a whole lot of years. And it was basically a suicide run without the intention of suicide. And so that was the dynamic that got the ball rolling. And that's why I kind of tell that little bit of that background. I became, like I said, on the outside, a human doing instead of a human being. My dynamic was that if I could just be good enough, then my father would accept me and love me and give me what I need, you know. And if I was just good enough, my mother wouldn't want to kill herself and wouldn't be drinking. And so I became this overzealous human doing. And so when it came to school, I thought if I just brought home good grades, they'd respect me, they'd love me, they'd change, they'd love each other. So I brought home the highest grades that town ever saw. And I was the valedictorian of the high school and the captain of all the teams, and I was setting records and doing all this stuff. But yet my father still never came to any of the sporting events. He wouldn't even sign my report card, even though all the grades on it were hundreds. And so from that point on, I kind of realized that no matter what I did, it wasn't going to be good enough. And that was another motive that went on in my life. No matter what I did, it wasn't going to be good enough. So I just kept going on that course, you know, being okay on the outside, a functioning addict and alcoholic. Of course, you know, along that journey in a small town, they have booze, and they have pot, and they have cigarettes, and if you're really lucky, you get mushrooms and mescaline once in a while. I mean, you had to go downtown in the metro to go get the white stuff, and you had to have some money. So basically, I drank if you were leaving some unattended, and I would smoke your dope for you to help you out, you know. And you could have cigarettes, because I'm playing sports, I ain't going to do that, but I want to do the other stuff full on. And that kind of began a really love affair on the side, you see, because when I took that drink and I smoked that dope, something happened. That big black pit of burning misery that kind of started when I was about this high and got worse as I got older as a result from being in that meat grinder of a home. When I took that drink or I did that mood-altering substance, the pain from that hole inside my chest went away for a while. And then I could be cool. And then I could be all right. And instead of being all fear-based, anxious, and self-conscious and shy, I could be loose and cool. It was that social lubricant that they hear about, that you talk about. And so this was something like Bill Wilson. When you read Bill Wilson's story on page 1, he talked about that alcohol was this alloy that was later going to be boomeranged, you know, back and eventually come back and hit him in the head. And that's what was going to happen to me. For a long time, alcohol and drugs were a constant friendly companion. And so they went with me to college. And I had to work 3 jobs through college. I went to an Ivy League school, and that's pretty damn expensive. And so I borrowed as much money as I could, the maximum amount on the loans, and I worked 3 jobs, and I got myself through there. I got accepted to medical school, and I went to the bank to to try to get more loans to go to medical school, because, you know, nobody in my family is going to help my fat ass, you know. So all of a sudden I go up and to the banks laughed at me. What are you laughing at? He goes, well, you can't get no more money. What do you mean I can't get no money? I came here for 4 years. I got plenty of money. Why can't we go another 4 years and I start paying it back? What do you say? He goes, no, you don't understand. You got no credit because you ain't got no job. And you already borrowed your 100 and whatever grand. Yeah, this is 1980s, by the way. So that was like $1 million. And so you ain't getting no more money. So I'm like, oh, that's not good. And so I panicked. You see, then God interceded. And the United States military was at the same time having a shortage of doctors and other professionals. So they developed this thing called the HBSP scholarship program, and they would pay for your medical school, provided you put a year of service in for every year they paid. So I go up to the fool with the fancy uniform, and I say, you tell me you're going to pay for my medical school? Yes, we are. You're going to pay me a year of medical school, and you're going to allow me to come into the service and work a year for every week. You mean like these college loans? I ain't going to have to pay for them until I'm 40 years old? Where were you 4 years ago, Holmes, you know? And nonetheless, that was the ticket for me to go to medical medical school. And again, booze and all these things happened. I was from a broken home, so I was in a lot of broken relationships. I had another addiction going on called sex and love addiction, codependency. It's called by a lot of names. And because I had modeled for me very unhealthy relationships, when I would, be out there trying to meet myself a honey, all of a sudden, when I put my eyes on one particular one, my heart would go boom, 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 boom. And you see, I thought that was chemistry. I thought she was the one for me. But I didn't know that inside there was a warning system that said, no, she's got a gun. Get out of there. She's going to kill you. And so I went to the very one that was going to do me the most harm. And I had one busted relationship, one busted heart, one busted situation after another. And so this, you think you'd learn after a while. Man, I got involved with that one. It turned out bad. I don't want to do that again. Well, interestingly enough, codependency is progressive, just like alcoholism. Every single relationship I got into got worse. Even though I thought I was learning, oh man, I'm not going to get into that again. I'm going to get me a fine honey next time. And all of a sudden, boom, I'm in a deeper pot than before. And this went over and over and over. Fat man getting a hallelujah for messing up your life with women? Nobody's done that, just me. I'm a fool. I got you. Yeah. There you go. Now we're waking up. So I ended up marrying a real one off the hook, and she was going to take me hostage, and she was going to fix me, and I wasn't going to have nothing to do with it. And she had this little secret, among others, and one secret was that her family had this birth defect running through generations, so much so that the United States Navy had studied her family and studying the genes of the kidney and the hearing and all this other stuff. And so all of a sudden, I get married, and we have a son while I'm in my anesthesiology residency, and my son has birth defects. In fact, I had to perform the resuscitation when he was born because the obstetrician and the OB nurse, they were doing the birth while I was up with my wife, and they froze. Because when something happened, like real bad, I was the one they called. And they didn't know what to do. So I had to leave the head of the table, and I go to let's just say the foot of the table. and I had to catch the package, and I had to bring it over to the bassinet and perform the resuscitation, call the NICU, and begin the fun and games that, for the first year of his life, ended up with about a dozen surgeries. And so you see, my hope of being able to raise to victory over my childhood by having a son and being the coach I never had in my father, and being the supportive father that I never had. And I was going to have victory over my childhood by being a father to my son that I never had. I was going to get mine no matter what. And in that moment, in that hospital, at that bassinet, I realized that, you know what? That wasn't going to happen. And I began to sink into a resentment so deep and so dark that I'm surprised I'm alive to tell you about it today. Because as an anesthesiology resident, the third busiest surgical hospital in the country, we were doing, as a resident, about 700 surgical procedures a year each. So I had my hands on one boatload of operating room grade IV fentanyl. Not watered down with that cotton candy heroin stuff that you see out on the streets, but straight fentanyl. And you see, when I was a first year junior resident, a senior resident by the name of Dave Lyda had also the same appetite for such a substance. And one day during my first year, there was a big commotion in the hospital because that fool was found dead in the call room with a needle in his arm. And when I went through the pain of that birth of my son, I had the thought that, boy, that stuff must have made you feel real good if that guy Dave was willing to take it and die using it. So I think that's going to help me feel better. So I slipped that needle into my vein, and I started to realize, unbeknownst to me at the beginning, of course, that was a short-acting, very powerful synthetic opiate that is extremely addicting. And so I got addicted, and I went on a road, a dark road, probably not caring whether I was going to live or die. And I just believe, maybe it's wrong, you know, you can call it whatever you want, fate, luck, circumstance, or whatever. I believe it was divine intervention that kept me from dying. And I was intervened on, because when you're shooting a boatload of fentanyl, you're not eating too much, and you're not feeling too good because of the constant withdrawal, and you're getting gray, and you're losing weight, and you got dark circles under your eyes, and you got some other problems, and people are going to take notice of that when you come to work sweating early every morning in withdrawal. You get what I'm saying? So luckily, people noticed that and cared enough about me to get me some help. Now, real long, because you know, for time's sake here, I want to get into a lot more solution than the problem. I ended up having a whole bunch of powers intervening, and namely the Connecticut Board of Medicine and a whole bunch of other things, an advocacy group thereof, and they put their thumb on me for a while, and long story short, I marched to that beat, and I did what I was supposed to do, and I was involved in what I was supposed to be involved in, and long story short, I was the first and only resident ever to be readmitted with a fentanyl addiction back to Hartford Hospital, and I completed my residency by repeating my last year. And I finished that residency, and when I finished the residency in 1994, 93 and 94 was the second highest snowfall accumulation in recorded history up in Connecticut. And I went off the road in the snowbank a couple times, and chap lifts and chipping ice on the windshield, and I said, that is the absolute last time I am ever going to see the white stuff, at least the stuff on the ground, not necessarily committing to that on the nose, but nonetheless, I'll never see snow again. And I got on that highway after my residency, and I drove as far south as 95 went, and I got my first job as a staff anesthesiologist at Hartford Hospital. One thing I didn't know and I didn't learn through that first round of recovery was that not only was this disease cunning, baffling, and powerful, it was patient and insidious. In 3.5 years after my first round of recovery, after working a little over a year at JFK, there was a whole lot of changes in medicine. Some of you people might know that. There was the evolution of managed care, and there was HMOs, and they started to real pinch the hospital-based physicians like pathologists and radiologists and anesthesiologists, and all those promises and all those things that were in my contract as far as being a partner and getting that $100,000 raise and doing all these things, all that went down the window. And so all the partners were busy protecting their monetary gains and taking the losses and passing them down to us peons. And so one day I'm doing all the work, they're out on the golf course because I can handle a little bit of stuff. And one day I started to develop that resentment again. And I thought to myself, well, if I'm going to do all the work and I'm not going to get all the pay, well, I surely deserve something. I'll tell you what, they got a whole lot of fentanyl in this place too. Maybe I ought to get high if I want to be locked up in this joint. Might as well enjoy it. So I took me a whole bunch of that. A little bit not too certain that this was the greatest thing I ever did, but went to the bathroom and began a several-month journey this time. This wasn't a couple-of-year journey, this was a couple of months, because they also forgot that this disease was progressive. And so in less than 2 months, I was taking 4 times the amount of fentanyl that I was in the first 2 years of my first run with that. In fact, I was taking 120 cc's a day. And if you've ever had the operating room stuff, okay, the big bottles come in 20 cc bottles, and 120 cc's, or 6 of those bottles, is 4 times the amount to put somebody into a coma for cardiac bypass surgery. And I was taking that every day, walking around doing my job. But was I really living? Or was I really dying? Absolutely. And so I got intervened on, and basically what happened, there wasn't all nice people to help me that time. People in the hospital said, get out of here, Holmes, you must be so messed up. If something happened, we're getting sued, get the hell out of here. So they just basically kicked me out. And if you ever go from taking 120 cc's a day of fentanyl to none, there's something going to happen to you. And I spent 4 days in a tub, stuff coming out of every end. I won't get into too much of that, guys. Still taping this thing. When are you going to turn that off so I can really get right? All right. And so I got in the tub. I tell the story sometimes at the center. I got in the tub as like one last great act of nobility, because I really thought I was going to die. I was convinced that there's no way I'm going to survive this. I'm going to die. And so I figured I'd get in a tub. Well, first of all, because there's a lot of mess happening before I'm dying. But, if my family comes in and finds me, it'll be a lot easier to clean up all the corpse and mess if it's all in the tub and it's walking down the drain. So I figured I was doing a great thing. So I hung out in the tub, and I hung out in the tub, And I'm out in the tub, and I'm waiting to die, and I'm wishing to die, and all this other stuff, but days are going by, and I'm not dying. And about 3.5, 4 days later, I'm not only not dying, but I'm feeling a little bit better that I might even be able to get up out of that tub. And so I got out of that tub. Of course, I let the water run on me because it wasn't a pretty sight. And I got in that tub, and now that I realized I wasn't going to die, I was like, oh man, I gotta go check that cell phone out. What's going on? And sure as rain, there were a bunch of people calling trying to get me into treatment. And long story short, when I kind of got myself together, I drove down to this place down in South Florida. And let me tell you something. I was absolutely livid angry because my best friend, my lover, my comforter, my strength, my courage, my helper, had turned against me and bit a hole in my entire life. And driving to that facility, I got an idea of what I was going to go through because I'd been through this treatment thing before, but my attitude was a whole bunch different. See, first time treatment was happening to me. I'm like, oh my, what is this? You know, what the hell's going on here? And then this time going to treatment, it didn't happen to me, it happened for me. And I was going to go there, and no matter what they told me to do, I was going to do it. Because let me tell you one thing. I was never, listen to me, I was never going to ever feel like that and go through that 4-day hell ever again. And if they told me, hey fatty, get your butt over there and push a peanut up the floor on your nose, on your hands and knees, I wouldn't ask no questions. I'd be diving on the floor and looking for that peanut. And whatever they told me to do, I took note of it, and it became a life and death errand. And so I got out that day, about whatever days later, and I got me to an AA meeting at the Easy Does It Club, 6 o'clock. And that became my home group, the happy hour, Monday and Friday. They had both a smoking room and a small non-smoking room. At Tuesday at 6 o'clock, there was a meeting called the Good Guys. And so I like going to 6 o'clock meeting. So I was going Monday, Tuesday, Friday to this 6 o'clock meeting. I got me a sponsor. In fact, I didn't even trust my own picking because you know how I pick women. If I was going to pick a sponsor, you know, I wouldn't do so good with that. So I went over to this guy, saw every meeting I was at. His name was Jack Adams. I said, Jack, you know me, I'm a little bit twisted in the brainstem here, you know, a little insane in the membrane. I probably need a real good sponsor, you know. I don't really trust my own thinking. I don't want to pick a sponsor, but if you were me or you were kind of coaching me, you know, who would be able to handle a nut job like me? He says, oh yeah, Adam, you are a one-whack case, bro. You need a lot of help. You need a tough guy. You need a guy who's not going to take your crap. I know. You need a guy by the name of Phil, or you know, Tom, or maybe Russell. And I look over and this is the guy Russell right there. You mean that Russell? He goes, yeah, that Russell. I go, thanks, Jack. You helped me a lot. So I go over to Russell. He was talking to some guy. So I do what any Italian would do. I push that other guy out of the way, and I introduce myself to Russell. I said, Russell, Jack over there says you're going to sponsor me. I need some help. You know, can you help me? And so he smiled. This real, you know what I'm talking about when I say a real smile? See, I had this fake smile on for 33 years. You know, dying inside, wanting to be cool, wanting to be smooth, wanting to be accepted. I had a fake smile, hey. But this guy had this gleam, this sparkle, this twinkle in his eye. And he had this real peace smile going on. And when I saw that, I was like, I need that. And so he did something crazy. He handed me his business card. He says, call me every day. If you're serious about me sponsoring, you can call me every day. And he did something that normally would have got the fool killed. He pushed me out of the way. He said, I'm talking to this guy. And don't you know who I think I am? You know what I mean? What the heck's going on here? So I had me a sponsor, and I went over that guy's house every Wednesday at 6 o'clock for about 7+ months. And I can't tell you much about what we did. We went to a big book. He gave me writing assignments. I wrote all this stuff. I had no idea what I was doing. But I did what he said. And I went over his house. I was even 5 minutes early. And we sat there and we worked and we worked and we worked. The only thing I remember from that time was that when I walked out of his house about an hour and a half later, I felt better than when I was walking into the house. And I couldn't explain that. Like, he wasn't smoking dope and giving me none, you know what I'm saying? We're just reading out of the big book, writing stuff, all this stuff. But somehow, I had all this hate, and I wanted to kill him, for giving me all that crap and not listening to me and hanging up, and I was going to bust him in the face, and he'd open that door, and there was that smile again. And I'm like, dang, man, this guy got me. And so I did this work, and I walk out of the house, and I didn't want to kill my sponsor. Oh. And I was actually caring about what he was saying and trusting him. And so this thing started to happen for me in the steps. And then one day he turned me loose on sponsoring some other people. And let me tell you something. That began that rocket ship ride on page 25.
Amen.
Because I started working with people, and as I started working with people, the stuff that was in the book started to come alive, not just for the guy that I was working with, but it started coming alive for me. And the thing that rocked my world was one day working a guy, my first sponsee on step 6, I realized that part of the big book on page 53 where it says, God is either everything, or God is nothing. God either is, or he isn't. What's our choice to be? And at that point, I realized this thing you were talking about, I just thought it was some fancy, funny, hocus-pocus thing to make us all not kill each other and not get drunk. But it was real. You mean there's this all-powerful, unseen, all-intelligent creator of the universe? And he's actually interested in a puke like me? And he's not only interested in a puke like me, he's allowing me to help a puke like this sit next to me in the car? Man, I want to know a God like that better. Because I've done a lot of bad stuff in my life. I've said a lot of stuff to God about putting me in that crap hole of a family when I was growing up. And I said a lot of things and done a lot of things, but in spite of all that, there was a God who loved me. And there was a God who forgave me. And there was a God who restored me. And there was a God who wanted to have a relationship with me. And there was a God who wanted to walk with me. And there was a God who wanted to show more of himself to me. And there was a God who wanted to display all the love and all the power and all the good stuff that he could do in his life in and for and through me. And for 22 years, that's been my story. And for 22 years, I haven't had to not go to meetings. And I haven't had to pick up another white chip. And I haven't had to forget about what my sponsor was, or get another one, or do this, or do that, or not do the steps, or do them over again. Because I've had the blessing of taking more than 100 men through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, and watching their lives change, and watching them sponsor people, and them sponsor people. A bunch of you have come through a place called the Treatment Center. And some of you remember a therapist who was a sponsee of mine by the name of Dan. Some of you know a case manager by the name of Jerry, who was my sponsee. Some of you know a guy by the name of Steve that was working at the halfway house and all this other stuff. And there's guys that I've had the benefit and the blessing to work with. And they've helped me. And what little I could give them, that helped them. And all that was showing me this plan that God had for my life. See, God's plan for my life wasn't for me to drink and drug myself into an early grave. God wanted me to have life abundantly in this life, and also to spend an eternity of perfection with him, avoiding the deep fires of a place without him. And if you're alive today and you're not dead by your addiction, should anybody be dead by what you were doing out there? And if you're not dead, I'm going to offer you this idea. Whether you knew God, whether you know God, whether you believe in God, whether you accepted God or not, God was believing in you. God was accepting you, and God was helping you, and God was saving you, even when you were trying to kill yourself. And a God like that is worth getting to know a lot better by as direct means as possible. Thanks for letting me share.